Hello, Degrassi readers, and welcome to Bruce Mackey's Library. I'm your host, Mix Lucy, and this time there's no special guest, but I still want to thank the special guests from our last two episodes, Sawyer and Dave. Sawyer is an amazing author slash poet, and Dave is an amazing actual librarian. And we had a great time talking about banned books and, of course, Degrassi books. So if you didn't listen to those last two episodes because you like to stick to just the Degrassi ones, I would still recommend checking those out. We talked a lot about Degrassi as well as Degrassi books. So please still go check those out. And I want to tell them thank you for their time, and it was a lot of fun. So for this episode, we're going to discuss the book Griff Gets a Hand. This is book number 3 in the Kids of Degrassi Street series. And before we get deep into it, I want to say a huge trigger warning. This episode, if you have not actually seen the namesake episode, it is about the death of a beloved friend of the kids, as well as an amazing character, Danny the crossing guard. So trigger warning for death, and trigger warning for stroke talk of strokes, and there's also a small trigger warning for some fatphobia around the character Rachel. This happened in the last book that involved her as well, and I just want to make sure that I warn y'all about that. That really does not sit well with me, to say the least. Also a trigger warning for religious connotation again, coming from Danny calling the kids sheep and referring to himself as a shepherd. I know that can be triggering for some people as someone with religious trauma. So I just wanted to warn y'all about those. But now back on track. Griff Gets a Hand is the third book in the Kids of Degrassi Street series, and it was published on January 1st in the year 1987. It has won an award. This award is the Canadian Children's Book Centre Our Choice Selection of the year 1987. According to the Formac Lormer publishing website, it deals with the subjects of school and education, as well as social themes of death, grief, and bereavement, in the subject of juvenile fiction. The description, according to the same website, says, "What does it mean to be a friend and to be loyal? The kids who live on Degrassi Street stay friends when times are happy and when they're sad. They know how much friends can mean. In Griff Gets a Hand and other stories, the kids learn the ups and downs of friendship. Connie discovers how to be a real team player. Lisa remembers how important a best friend can be, and Griff has to cope with the death of his good pal, Danny." Based on the groundbreaking Kids of Degrassi Street television program, this book offers a sensitive and engaging look at the challenges of childhood. And I always like to give a glimpse of what Goodreads says about the book. And at the time of recording, there is a 4.33 rating on Goodreads. 3 ratings, one of which is mine, and 2 reviews, one of which is also mine. There is 1 5-star rating and 2 4-star ratings. And the one review that isn't mine says, "If you don't feel like attempting to find the original The Kids of Degrassi Street episodes, you can always read the books based on the episodes." While that is technically valid, it's not really a review of the book itself, and that's not always true. The books are often harder to find than the episodes and are often different than the episodes. Just want to clarify that. But that's what Goodreads says. This time we have the same designer as Lisa Makes the Headlines, Mr. Don Fernley, but we do have a different illustrator, and a different editor. Our illustrations are done by Heather Collins, and I'm going to read a bit about her from kidscanpress.com. Her biography there says, Heather Collins lives in Toronto with her husband and 2 children and has been illustrating children's books for more than 20 years. When Heather receives a manuscript, she visualizes the story in her mind's eye, even plotting the storyboards before preparing her rough illustrations. She may work for weeks or even months before the pictures feel right. At this point, she is ready for outside reaction and feedback and to begin adding detail and color, usually with colored pencils, paints, or pastels. Heather's body of work includes many non-fiction books, such as the award-winning A Pioneer Story, which incorporates fact, fiction, and over 400 line drawings, all lovingly researched and executed. Her latest book is Out Came the Sun and was published in September of 2007. She has won multiple awards, one for the book Get Outside in 2012, Best Books for Kids and Teens, Starred Selection, Canadian Children's Book Center winner, 3 for the book The Kids Book of the Night Sky. That was a 2005 Teacher's Choice International Reading Association winner, as well as a 2004 Parents' Choice Recommended Award for Pennsylvania School Librarians Association winner, and a 2004 YA Top 40 Nonfiction winner. She's also written 2 picture books. One is Jack and Jill 2003 and Little Miss Muffet 2003. So that is our illustrator, Heather Collins from Kids Can Press. And our editor this time around is Sheila Dalton, and I'm going to read her bio from her Goodreads. It says, I love to read more than I love to write, but I love both. I was born in England, but have lived in Canada with small breaks since I was 6. I currently live in Newmarket, a town near Toronto, Ontario, where I spend my days gardening, meditating, taking care of 2 cats, cooking, and cooking up stories. I've worked as a barmaid in New England, an art gallery assistant, a freelance editor and writer, and a reference librarian. Okay, she says a lot of things here. Hey, editing me here. Yeah, I edited out a lot of her bio because she went on for a while, and if you want to learn more about her, go check out her Goodreads. The link will be in the description on Spotify. Yeah, sorry, but this episode's not about her, and it was starting to drag on, so here's the important stuff about her. My husband was half Cree and was the inspiration for my YA mystery, Trial by Fire. I don't know what else to tell you about me. Oh yes, I studied English language and literature at the University of Toronto and the University of London, England. She has written several books by herself, one called The Girl in the Box, which is rated 3.87 stars on Goodreads, one called Stolen, which is rated 4.41 stars, one called Leopards/Parrots, which is 4.25 stars, one called Orangutans/Gazelles, Getting to Know Nature's Children, 4.31 stars, and the aforementioned Trial by Fire is rated 4.30 stars. Oh, as well as Doggerella, which is 4.33 stars, and Blowing Holes Through Every Day, 4.40 stars, Bubble Mania, 4.20 stars, Catalog is 5 stars. Yeah, she's got a lot of highly rated books, and that is our editor, Sheila Dalton. And now we'll move on to our dedication. This dedication is to Bruce Mackey. So normally when a book is dedicated to someone and I can look them up, I will look them up and tell you a few short facts about them. But in this case, our whole first episode is dedicated to the amazing librarian, Mr. Bruce Mackey. And I don't feel the need to go into a whole little dedication about him here because you can just go listen to that whole first episode. So I'm just going to read the dedication from this book, which I also read in that episode. It says, "To Bruce Mackey, the grandfather of Degrassi Street and a dear friend of the kids." So as we go through this book, I will try to figure out why they chose this specific book to dedicate to him, but honestly, I don't know for sure. The episodes in this book are Connie Makes a Catch, which is episode number 21, and that is aired on December 1st, 1985. Bruce is not in this episode, according to IMDb, as well as my watching of it. So I'm not sure why that one is in a one dedicated to him. But the theme is being yourself. And then the next episode in this book is Lisa Gets the Picture, which is episode number 25, aired on December 29th, 1985. Bruce is in this episode as Mr. Mackey, so that fits well for being dedicated to him. The theme is on, in my personal opinion, balancing dating and friends, or just balancing multiple friendships. And then the last episode in this book is Griff Gets a Hand, which is episode number 26, the last of the Kids of Degrassi Street series, and it aired on January 5th of 1986. Bruce also isn't in this episode. I did find a different Mackey in this episode. Clark Mackey did do the sound editing, but I couldn't find any relation between the two within my limited Google search. The theme of this episode is grief, in my personal opinion. So, like I said, trigger warning for fatphobia, grief, talk about strokes, death, and religious connotation, talking about people being sheeps and shepherds and such. So just don't forget those, and we're going to dive into the book now. So during our last book we discussed, I complained a decent amount about the lack of pictures, since not only did our first book have a lot of great pictures, but also the character in the name of the book is an artist. And I'll reiterate that here because, again, we only get 3 pictures in the whole book. They're all illustrations at the beginning of every story. And for the younger readers that the books are meant for, I'm guessing it can be confusing to have pictures of moments that are in the middle of the story shown before the story even starts, especially if they hadn't seen the episodes, which, according to the Goodreads review, the books can replace the episodes, so I feel like that could be confusing. And by the time you get to what the picture is of, you might have forgotten even seeing the picture. Just my personal opinion. Anyway, we're going to start Connie Makes a Catch on page 3. And the picture at the beginning of the story is Connie wearing a baseball hat looking in the mirror in the bathroom of Degrassi Elementary. And she's holding a bunch of papers. She's wearing a dress and a hat and a headband and earrings and necklace pearls. It's a lot. And the caption underneath it says, "She had to admit a baseball cap looked pretty silly with a nylon headscarf." My bad, I thought it was a headband. "And a prom dress." And the quote says, "Advice," she told her reflection sadly. "Advice. Everybody's got advice." And I'm not going to read the whole book, just my notes in case this is like your first episode listening to me. So my first note says Candy's last name. So in the show, I watched every episode I could find with Candy, and his last name was never actually said in the show, but the book says it right here. The line in the book is, "The game was tied at 6 runs each, and Candy Lamb was up to bat." I guessed that this is an Easter egg since Nancy Lamb is the actress who played Irene. His last name isn't said in the show or online, as far as I could tell through like Degrassi fandom and Degrassi wiki, but I think it's an Easter egg to Nancy Lamb, like a little shout out, because her time, Irene's time in the show was done by this point, and it just seemed like a nice little nod to her. My next note is ping pong ball with pillow. And I wrote that because of a line on page 3 as well that says, "But even if he couldn't have hit a ping pong ball with a pillow, she would have still worshipped him." And I just thought that was very funny, good imagery for a kid's book. It's definitely something I could picture as I was reading. I have another note on page 4 that says, Connie being upset about how she looks. This is where we get a little bit of Connie's inner thoughts about herself. It says she wished there was some way she could make him notice her. If only she had sizzling, sculptured peaks in her hair, instead of looking like a carrot with bangs. A gold tan instead of her freckles wouldn't hurt either. Thank goodness her front tooth had finally grown back in, but she still didn't look like a magazine ad. She looked like what she was, a scruffy kid in jeans. She wished she were as pretty as Lisa Kennard, who had Robin Griffiths following her like a hungry puppy. Which leads me to the note that says, happy they touched lightly on the tooth thing from Jeffrey Finds a Friend in our last book. So yes, in our last book, they did a picture day in the episode Jeffrey Finds a Friend. And in the book version, they pointed out that she was smiling funny because she had lost a tooth. I will also point out here that there is more puppy imagery. So also in our last book, during the episode version of, I think it's Jeffrey Finds a Friend as well. I can't look it up because Internet Archive is acting up right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Pete asked Griff to start a drawing business with him, and Griff mentally, in his head, said that Pete was a puppy waiting for a bone that was not his. So that's 2 books in a row where they kind of mention a child being like a hungry puppy, but this time it is Griff instead of Pete. And as we go on, you will see more puppy imagery, more puppy thoughts and comparisons, which I found to be very interesting, that it's something that this author keeps coming back to. I put in another small note on page 7 because I needed to look up Foster Grant sunglasses, and that's because Martin shoved his bike riding vest into his carrier basket and put on a pair of Foster Grant sunglasses. The book specifies Foster Grant. You can't really tell in the episode, and I have heard of this brand before, so I was just curious, like, if it was actually around at that time. And it was, they're right. I didn't realize how old the brand was. And then onto page 8, we hear more of Connie's inner thoughts. This is because on page 7, it says, the term wasn't getting off to a good start for Connie either. She tried to catch Candy's eye several times during Miss Gonzalez's lecture about their future at Degrassi Junior High, but even when he turned in her direction, he stared quite blankly. And Connie's inner thoughts said, "Meet the invisible woman," Connie thought, watching glumly as Lisa and Griff exchanged smiles across the classroom. Finally, in frustration, she stretched her leg across the aisle and nudged Candy's foot. He looked around in annoyance, met her smile with about as much interest as he'd pay to a streetcar driver, and turned his attention back to Miss Gonzalez. And this is where I put the note. They follow up on the drawing business I just mentioned earlier. Pete wanted to start with Griff. Last time Griff said Pete was like a dog, begging for a bone. But now Connie is thinking Pete is the owner of Griff, who is like a dog with a trick. So earlier Griff was a hungry puppy watching Lisa, and now he's like a dog with a trick that Pete owns. And I put that because it says, after class, Connie lingered behind, trying to think up some excuse to talk to Candy. But then he was joined by two of his friends, and they left talking a blue streak about baseball, which I did have to Google what the heck a blue streak was. And it's speak continuously and at great length. That's what a blue streak is. Anyway, she followed behind them, too unsure of her welcome to catch up. Partway up the stairs, on the landing between flights, she stopped to watch Griff drawing a caricature, I'll try that again, caricature of one of the girls. Pete Riley was hovering around and acting very important, like a proud owner showing off his dog's tricks. Pete had a way of looking bossy, even when he wasn't saying anything. The girl's smile was becoming a bit rigid. Through it she hissed, "How long's this gonna take? I got another class." Pete polished the air with outspread hands, saying, "Patience, Karen. You can't rush art." Rachel, on her way upstairs, asked what was going on. Pete said with pride, "Griff and me are in the caricature business. I'm his business manager. I can make an appointment for you, Rachel. Only 25 cents a picture. Pay now, pose later." I made this note here because that sounded really low for someone like Pete Riley, that price. So I went back to the episode after reading that, and the episode has a sign on the wall that says only $2. So I'm not sure why the book says 25 cents. $2 does sound a lot better, especially since in my head, Pete is probably getting a cut for making the deals and running the business, even though Griff is doing like a vast majority of the work. So they're probably splitting and getting $1 both for each picture. I don't know how you would split 25 cents in two. Like 12 cents each? That's nothing. So $2 does sound right. I don't know why they changed that for the book, but there you go. And another note is made on page 10. The note says, "I like that they keep touching on things that were in the last book." And I will agree, I do like this. I do feel like it adds to the order, which we're probably sadly going to lose soon, since this book includes the last episode of the series, which means it's definitely supposed to be read after Griff makes a date. But I wrote that because it says, Casey clicked over in her mind what the heroines in her Harley Quinn romances did to attract the heroes. Usually they didn't have to do anything much because they were either rich or beautiful. And we learn a lot about Casey's love of Harley Quinn romance novels in the last book, because she is sneaking reading them in class and teaching Lisa how to get a date with Griff. And Griff makes a date. So it's a through line. And it will continue to be a through line, which you'll learn about later in our last two episodes discussed in this book. which is one of the reasons why Casey is my favorite kid of Degrassi Street, to be honest. I absolutely love her love of romance and novels. It's something I love as well. And my next two notes are on page 14. The first one says, "We don't see Lisa do this in the episode, but it's a nice touch." And I wrote that because on page 14 it says that Lisa slammed down her fork and screamed, "You just don't want me to have any fun," which that's in the episode, but what's not in the episode is she stormed out of the room and stamped upstairs, ignoring her father as he yelled after her, "You come right back here and sit down." She flung herself on her bed and burst into angry tears. Downstairs, her parents looked despairingly at each other. The generation gap was opening at their feet. So I like seeing that added, she flung herself on her bed, she burst into angry tears. It adds more drama that we just don't get to see in the episode because they have to flash to the next thing, which is what I'm about to read right now. So the next thing is we arrive at Connie's house after her newspaper delivery, which in my brain I did have to go back and calculate because in the episode Jeffrey Finds a Friend, Connie and Jeffrey make a bet over who gets the highest score in the next math test. The bet was if Connie got the lowest score, she would stop charging Jeffrey for the weeks that he owed for the newspaper. But if Jeffrey got a lower score, he would do her newspaper route. And my brain forgot how long he would do the newspaper route for and if he was supposed to still be doing it. But I went back and watched the episode because I couldn't read on archive.org because right now the Internet Archive is down. And it's supposed to be 2 weeks. He's supposed to do the newspaper route for 2 weeks. And that episode came out in February 8th of 1985. So that's the brain math on that. So sorry to distract you. Anyway, so because in the episode we cut to Connie's, we don't get to see Lisa slam into her bedroom and cry. Instead, we get to see Connie arriving at home after her newspaper delivery, and it says, "There must be some way of attracting Candy's attention that didn't make her look like a nerd. The house had been pretty quiet since her sister Liz went to college." This is where I had to do some mental math because in my head, Liz was not old enough to go to college. Nobody on the Kids of Degrassi Street would be old enough to go to college in my head. Now, I'm American. This show is Canadian, so maybe college is different in Canada in 1985? Or, yeah, 1985 when this episode aired, in 1987 when this book was printed. But I had to do some math here. It was a lot. So, I was calculating here. The last time we saw Liz, it was in the episode Jeffrey Makes a Friend. I was like, okay, we don't really get to see her for more than 10 seconds there. But that one is 5 years after the very, very first episode of The Kids of Degrassi Street, where Ida is 9. And this is all just rough math, don't quote me, please. But Ida's 9 in Ida Makes a Movie. That one I did Google, that is fact. And then about 5 years later, when we meet Liz for the first time ever in Liz Sits the Schlegels. Now, she is, according to IMDb, in Catherine Finds Her Balance, but I wasn't able to see her, so I wasn't able to guess how old she looks in that episode. They never said her name, they never pointed her out, and none of them looked like her to me. So the episode where I was able to recognize her was Liz Sits the Schlegels, which makes sense. She's the namesake in that one. That is 5 years after Ida Makes a Movie. So Ida would be around 14. And Ida treats Liz like, well, Liz is taking my old job. but I don't really care because I'm going to get a real job. I'm not going to babysit anymore because that's for little kids. That's not a real job. So, like, that informs me in my head that Liz is younger than Ida. When we first meet Liz, it's in 1984. And during the episode, Liz sits the Schlegels, or at least as I could identify her. IMDb says differently, but I didn't recognize her in that episode, so maybe I'm wrong. But in the episode Connie Makes the Catch, it is 1985. Basically 5 years and a month later. And then Ida makes a movie. It's 5 years and a month later during Connie Makes the Catch. That's the episode we're on right now. And that means that Ida is around 14, so Liz would be younger than her, if my math is correct. So Liz is most likely 13, 12 or 13. And she should not be in college at the age of 12 or 13. So I don't really know why it says she's in college. But yeah, it says Liz went to college. You know, feel free to math check me if you know better, if you're better at math than I am, because I do kind of suck at math, if you couldn't tell. This is just like my rough guesstimation, because reading the line, the house had been pretty quiet since her sister Liz went to college, made my brain kind of explode. Like, it doesn't say when, like, since Liz went to visit a college or check out a college. It just says went to college. Like, maybe if she was visiting a college or taking a college tour, that would be a little bit different. But maybe Liz is, like, super fucking smart, like, gifted and talented kind of smart, like in the Bright Sparks kind of smart. Or Quest for the Best, I guess, is this generation. Quest for the Best. So maybe she's really smart and she got into college early, like young Sheldon kind of shit, but it just doesn't feel right to me. So I had to make that note. Anyway, I'll go on. The house had been pretty quiet since her sister Liz went to college, and now her mom had to go look after grandma, who'd had, trigger warning here, who'd had another one of her strokes. I'll keep reading on because there's more. Mom's sister Luella looked in most days to clean up a little and cook supper for Connie and her dad. So the dad stayed with Mom's sister and Connie while supposedly Mom went to look after Grandma. They don't say where, after another of her strokes, so multiple strokes, and Liz went to college. Now, you may have heard me say Mom's sister Luella and add extra emphasis there, and that is because, if you have not watched on, Luella is a very important character to me in Degrassi Junior High Season 3 during the episode Season's Greetings, because Luella is the janitor who calls Joey Jeremiah a goofball. And that Luella is played by Susan Nielsen, whom we'll get to more later as she is an author of many Degrassi Junior High books, the character books. And I've been reading a lot of her other books recently, and I really enjoy her, so I just wanted to shout that out and say that maybe the name Luella in Degrassi Junior High is a callback to this Luella here. I can't confirm, nor can I deny. It stuck out to me, and I would like to give that some credence. So yeah, that catches us up on where Liz is, even though she's a minor character at this point, and they didn't really need to explain where she was. They don't explain it in the show. It's just written here. She went to college. That doesn't feel credible to me, as I explained, but they don't need to explain it to me, I guess. That's all I wrote. Liz went to college. So, there we go. My next note is on page 16. I wrote a note for a quote that didn't seem good for a children's book to me. So I'm going to write a trigger warning here. There is a quote for what kind of sounds like animal abuse. And I forgot this quote was in here until just now. Page 16 says, Connie submitted like a lamb to the slaughter. That's really just not a quote that should be in a kid's book, in my personal opinion. It's just not good. And it says, her aunt was delighted to be in charge of Connie's makeover, sweeping away Connie's doubts. She delved into trunks and boxes, finding scarves, high-heeled shoes, and necklaces. Trust me, hun, says Luella. Connie submitted like a lamb to the slaughter. Maybe Auntie Lou was right. She got Uncle Jack, didn't she? And Mom got Dad. Yeah, I just don't feel like that should be how you write that she submitted. Maybe just, Connie considered her options and thought maybe Auntie Lou was right. That would have been fine. Connie considered her options and decided that her aunt was right. That's what I would write. That feels way better to me than submitting like a lamb to slaughter. Just not a good visual for children. My next note is on page 18. It says, page 18 has an interesting note about Connie wearing her mom's Giorgio, I think is how you pronounce that, Giorgio, body spray and trying on pantyhose along with spike heels. And I made that note because it says, Connie sat down across the aisle from Candy. After one unbelieving stare, he didn't give her a second glance. Even her mom's Giorgio body spray didn't seem to get to him. Something was definitely wrong. Maybe she should have worn pantyhose and those awful spike heels that Auntie Lou had made her try on, but they made her feel she was trying to balance on stilts. She dragged her attention back to Miss Gonzalez's lesson. It wandered again. She wondered whether the itch on her back meant a zit was popping out, and whether it showed above the top of this tacky, low-backed thing Auntie Lou had persuaded her to wear. She wondered whether she should tell Candy she'd done it on a dare. So, yeah, she just does not feel like herself in this outfit at all, and I don't blame her. And then my next note is for the very next page. Page 19 says that Candy muttered a swear word. It says that right here. He muttered a swear word and took after her. Candy was chasing Connie at last. In her excitement, she bumped up against walls as she rounded corridor corners, her skirt swishing and her beads jumping and swinging. So, yes, I rewatched the episode after this and made sure I turned the volume as loud as I could. I didn't hear him mutter a swear word, but it definitely builds the suspense and adds a little extra to the book, so I can see why they would add that in there. And then my next note is for page 22, and the note says, Gail suggested they all meet for ice cream, but this isn't in the episode. And that's true. It says right here, Lisa too was beginning to wonder whether she'd got it right when she told her stepmother that she and Casey were going shopping at Gerrard Square. Gail had said she might see them up there. She'd even suggested they all meet for an ice cream. Lisa got out of that one, but when her dad said that baby Nicholas would be with the sitter till 6 and they might have time to catch a movie, her heart sank. And we do see her dad suggest they might have time to watch a movie, but we don't see Gail suggest they go get ice cream in the episode. So I thought that was an interesting thing to add. There's another note for this episode on page 25. On page 25, there is a quote that says, Lisa hid behind a Bogart cutout with her head in a phone booth. But I had to Google what a Bogart cutout was, and apparently it is a cutout of the actor Humphrey Bogart. And that's not in the episode because I didn't know who Humphrey Bogart was. I had to Google and look him up. He's not in the episode, nor is a cutout of him. And there's not a phone booth either, which is like the one thing that stuck out to me. I was like, I don't remember a phone booth. They're inside. And it's not a phone booth, it is just a wall phone, like a dial phone stuck to a wall. There's no booth. But the exact quote in the book says, "It hardly surprised him when, just before the final credits, Lisa pushed past him and ran for the foyer. He found her half hidden by a Bogart cutout with her head in a phone booth. She stayed like that until there was no one left in the theater." And she did run and hide her head while holding a phone to her ear and pretending to make a call in the episode, but there's no cutout and there's no phone booth. So I don't know why they added that in. Normally, phone booths would not be inside. From my knowledge, that wouldn't make any sense. And I don't think a cutout for an actor would be outside, where a phone booth normally would be. So it doesn't make any sense to me at all, anyway. But my last note for this episode is on page 27. The note says, "Nicholas is on the rug and Lisa tries to jingle a toy near him. But that's wrong. In the episode, her dad is holding him and sitting in a rocking chair." So, yes, in the book, the exact quote is, "They were sitting on the couch with Nicholas on the rug at their feet. Gail gestured to the space between them, exchanging a look with her husband. Lisa tried to cover her discomfort by jingling a toy at Nicholas. They'd seen her this afternoon. She was sure they'd seen her." But yes, in the episode, that's totally different. In the episode, her dad is sitting in a rocking chair holding the baby, and Lisa does not grab a toy nor try to jingle it at Nicholas. She's not in arm's reach of him. I don't know why they changed this, but I guess it's just to give more credence to Nicholas being there and trying to build on their relationship a little bit more. And my next note isn't until the next episode in the book. The next episode in the book is Lisa Gets the Picture, and the illustration for that episode in this book is Casey watching Lisa and Griff talk while holding a notebook for the yearbook interviews. And the caption for the picture says, "Lisa and Griff wandered past, gazing at each other and sharing a joke. Casey gave them a hostile look." So my very first note for this episode is on the first page of it, which is page 35. And the note says, "Picture looked like cat vomit." And that is because it says, "Casey and Lisa held hands and crossed their fingers. It didn't help. The machine did its familiar rock and roll and disgorged a picture of what looked like cat vomit." Lisa made a face in imitation of yet another lousy copy of her photograph. 30 cents wasted. So yeah, I just liked the description, thought it was very unique. I don't own a cat, so I don't know what cat vomit looks like. But I can agree the picture in the episode didn't look good. My next note is on the very next page. I actually have two of them, but the first one says yearbook funds, and that is because there's a few examples given for how they fundraised for the yearbook, and it says, "But the girls had been so busy with fundraising projects for the yearbook," and then in parentheses it says, "a walkathon, a song and dance show, and a window washing session." Now we do see the song and dance show. There is a talent show in the Kids of Degrassi Street. That is in the episode Martin Hears the Music, I'm pretty sure. And We do see the window washing session in the episode Karen Keeps Her Word, but I do not remember a walkathon. I could be wrong. At this point, it could just be not in my memory because it's not in an episode I've seen recently, because I've been watching the episodes in the order of the books, in the order that I'm reading them. So my memories are kind of jumbled, which is like the whole point of this podcast, or at least this season of this podcast. And like, what order are we supposed to be reading this in? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't see the walkathon yet. And if I was reading as I was watching for the very first time, I also wouldn't have seen the song and dance show or the window washing session. But I remember those because I have seen all of the episodes of Degrassi of every generation. So I know them. Anyway, my next note is because they compare Rachel to a slave driver. And the exact quote is, Rachel had been beavering away all term, which I did have to Google what to beaver away means. And it just means work hard for a long time. I was literally picturing someone making a wooden dam. Anyway, Rachel had been beavering away all term, planning, organizing, and coordinating. It says co-ordinating, so coordinating, so relentlessly that there had been more than one mutter about slave drivers and capital B, capital S, Big Sister. So I did Google Big Sister to try to figure this out, and I just kept getting the definition of an actual older sister of someone. So I don't know if that's like a reference to what people say Big Brother, 1984 kind of a deal. But this book was published in 1987, so I just feel like it can't be a reference to 1984. Maybe the term Big Brother has been around for generations and generations, and I just didn't know about it because I'm 29. And maybe, yeah, they're just gendering correctly for Big Sister instead of Big Brother. That's what feels correct to me. I just don't feel like you should be calling her a slave driver, especially considering she is white and there are children of color, black children, Karen and Billy to be more specific, and Casey as well, that she is bossing around. It just doesn't sit well with me. It does feel racially charged, you know? Slaves are people of color. And I don't feel like that should be like, I would correct this to say that there had been more than one utter about bossiness and a need to talk to Rachel and try to correct things or something along those lines. I would not use the term slave drivers. Just does not sit right with me. That would make things more comfortable. And my next note is on the very next page, page 37, where it states that they are working in Judy Erickson's dad's garage, and it's about their setup as they worked on the yearbook. And the exact quote in the book is, "The yearbook committee members were all busy working away when Lisa and Casey arrived on the scene. Judy Erickson's father had given the kids permission to use his garage as the yearbook office while he was away on a selling trip. Miss Rothfels of the Degrassi real estate office, Casey's mom, had donated an old Underwood typewriter, and Rachel had brought a rickety table from the Hewitt attic. The rather battered chair had been banished from Connie Jacobs' kitchen, and Pete Riley had found the rusty filing cabinet in the back of the Wingaway Travel Bureau. He was into negotiations for the purchase of an old copying machine he'd cited at the same time." So while we see the setup that they have in the episode, we don't get all those details, and until we read this book. My next note is on page 40, and it says, "This is the third time within the last 2 books that a kid has been referred to as a dog." And that is because of this quote where it says, "Casey was suddenly alert. If she'd been a dog, her ears would have pricked up." And the quote says, "So Griff might be an architect or an artist or a designer," continued Mr. Mackey. "In my case, I enjoyed helping my younger brothers and sisters with their homework, and that's why I chose teaching. Maybe some of you love animals. How about training to be a veterinarian? Rachel here may be a future cabinet minister." Now, in case you don't know, he's talking about a political cabinet, but I didn't know those had ministers. I don't think it's a religious thing. I think it's some kind of Canadian mumbo jumbo. I don't know. I don't know anything about politics other than who I'm voting for. So, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a political cabinet. I don't know what minister means. But yeah, Casey, if she'd been a dog, her ears would have pricked up. So that's the third time within the last 2 books that a kid has been a dog. I wrote, but I think I'm wrong. I think it's actually the 4th time. Yeah, because there was a time in the last book, and then there was 2 times in this book, and now there's this one, so that's 4. I just miscounted in my notes. So yeah, that's the 4th time. This author really loves to refer to kids as dogs. And I'm not sure why, but I think it's important to just, keep that in your brain. Because it's very interesting to me to keep track of. And then my next note is not until page 48, because they do add on something that I love seeing when the books add on to things that happen in the episode. So this is, if you watched the episode, this is after Mr. Mackey catches Lisa and Griff talking in class, and Lisa admits that she was the only one talking, and Griff wanted her to go away, and she gets in trouble, and he says, "I want you to use your time here wisely. I want you to make a list of things that you're interested in and explain how they might apply to your future. Do you understand?" And the book says, "She thought she understood, but when it came to writing down things that interested her, she couldn't see what use any of them would be to her future." And my note says Lisa's list of interests, because they do go on to actually have her write a list of her interests. And her interests are clothes, dash, wearing them, not selling them. Movies, dash, watching them, not making them. Griff, dash, no future there. Camping in the woods, dash, were there any lady lumberjacks? Question mark. I do find it interesting that they commented on camping in the woods, because she does go camping in an episode before this, because this is the episode before the last one. In the episode, Samantha has a visitor, and her cousin, Samantha, and some little boy that I'm blanking on the name of, go camping in the woods. Anyway, it says, swimming, dash, how good did you have to be to get medals? I like that they touched on that she's still swimming, because in the episode, the Canards move out, which we haven't read yet, but that is before Griff makes a date, because if you remember, in Griff Makes a Date, she's moving back to Toronto from Vancouver, and in the Canards Move Out, she is taking her last swimming lesson and then moving to Vancouver until she moves back. But in that episode, they think that she's moving away for good. So yeah, how good did you have to be to get medals for swimming? And then again it says, Griff, dash, oh, stop thinking about him. Roller skating, dash, perhaps she could be a skating waitress and serve martinis. Now, I think the roller skating is based on, there's an episode, Pete Takes a Chance, where Lisa is roller skating down this bridge, and Pete is like taking pictures of it and selling the pictures to some newspaper for an article about it, because she's supposed to be breaking a roller skating record. So yes, roller skating dash, perhaps she could be a skating waitress and serve martinis. She began to smile at the idea, saw Mr. Mackey glance at her, and hastily jotted down a few random words. She wondered if her teacher wanted to get home to supper. She wondered what Gail would cook for supper. She wondered what Griff liked for supper. Dash, stop it. And then here's a lovely little note where I said, thoughts of Noel, because the very next line is, she wondered what her brother Noel was having for lunch in Vancouver. She remembered how Noel used to tease her years ago when she and Casey started their Degrassi Street Journal. And that was in the episode Lisa Makes the Headlines, which you may remember was the name of the very first Kids of Degrassi Street book that we discussed in this podcast. And it continues, hey, she'd forgotten that she'd wanted to be a newspaper reporter. She'd start with that. At last she began to write busily. Perhaps Mr. Mackey did want his supper. After about 20 minutes, he told her she could go. I didn't finish, Mr. Mackey, she ventured. You may have until Monday to hand it in. Good night, Lisa. Good night, Mr. Mackey. The corridor was quiet and empty, except for the janitor who was mopping at the far end. Lisa, her head bent in thought, started towards the staircase. A sudden movement as she turned the corner startled her so much that she dropped her books. So yeah, that movement was Griff. He was still there. And that leads me into my next note, which is on the very next page, page 50. And my next note says, Danny's sheep metaphor is back, which means it's time for our trigger warning for religious connotation. And the quote is, she nearly said detention was the best invention since the wheel, but managed a shrug and an okay, I guess. By the time they reached the main crossing where Danny the crossing guard still stood, waiting for any stray sheep kept late at school, Lisa and Griff were back to being almost as friendly as before their movie date. So yeah, I just wanted to trigger warning there for religious connotation and sheep metaphors. And my next note isn't until around 8 pages later, on page number 58, where I made the note that says, they're wrong. This happened after class. And Lisa said, see you, Casey, while walking away. So I made that note because there is a point where they are wrong. And the exact point is where the book says, Lisa and Griff wandered past, gazing at each other and sharing a joke. Casey gave them a hostile look and didn't reply to Lisa's offhanded, hey, Casey. Connie was reading the interview notepad over Casey's shoulder and said, hey, this looks like fun if you need any help. So, yeah, actually, that doesn't happen in the episode. In the episode, they are leaving the class and Casey is interviewing Connie while Lisa and Griff are walking out of the class, and Lisa says, see you, Casey, instead of hi, Casey. I just thought that was interesting. My next note is for the very next page, page number 59, and my note says, wrong again. They never got to the crosswalk. This happened in the hallway. And that is because it says, Lisa and Griff left school together, talking and laughing all the way to Danny's crosswalk. This was where they would normally have parted, but Lisa was expecting Griff to invite her home or suggest a Sunday at the York Cellar. Instead, he merely said, Bye, Lisa, with a cheerful wave to Danny. He started away. Wait, she called, very surprised. I thought we were doing the pictures together. Griff replied, walking backwards away from her. Sorry, after that math test this morning, boy, have I got a lot of homework to do. I just got a pass, Lisa, and I'm way behind. And yeah, in the episode, this happens in the hallway. They never get all the way outside to Danny's crosswalk. My suspicion is that they changed this to include Danny as to kind of add suspense and like help y'all remember that Danny is there and it adds like his importance before the very next episode where we know that Danny passes. And we know this because I said this at the beginning of this podcast episode. So, yes, in the next episode in this book, Danny passes away, and we need to add more of him, in my personal opinion, to kind of bump up his importance in a way. And then I have another note on this page, page 64, where there is a reference to something called Cagney and Lacey. And I had to Google who the fuck Cagney and Lacey are because I had never heard of them. So the exact quote is, You and Casey, you and Casey. The words echoed in Lisa's mind. It was true they went together like, dash, like Cagney and Lacey or something, dash, a team. They'd been a team. Maybe they still were. So I googled Cagney and Lacey, and that is actually the name of some buddy cops in a female cop show. And I'm going to read a little bit about that cop show for y'all, just so you can get like the idea in your head and get what I googled about them. Cagney and Lacey was a drama in 1982 that ran for 7 seasons. And it says Mary Beth Lacey and Chris Cagney, so they go by their last names, are female police officers in New York City. The women are partners and friends, but they lead different personal lives. Cagney is a single career minded woman, while Lacey is a married mother. In addition to going after the bad guys, the ladies have to combat sexism in the male dominated workplace. Tyne Daly stars as Mary Beth Lacey, and Sharon Gleese plays the part of Chris Cagney for most of the show's running. So yeah, the 7-season-long cop drama in 1982 is the reference to Cagney and Lacey, which is apparently Lisa and Casey, or Casey and Lisa, if you want to go in the same kind of alphabetical order that they're going in this reference. And I'll admit, like, the names kind of sound similar, so I get that, but I would love to see this reference updated if there was a reprint, because most people are going to have to Google who that is. So yeah, I made a note about that. And then my next note is on page 67. My note says this line isn't in the episode, and that's because there is a line here after Casey and Lisa kind of make up from their fight in the library. It says, her face suddenly crinkled into a familiar merry grin. Know my pet peeve? Quarreling with Lisa. So that is a cute line and it kind of wraps things up, but it's just not in the episode, so I thought it was important to point that out and read it to y'all. I do think it's cute, but I do feel like they don't know what a pet peeve is, because that's not really a pet peeve. Like, a pet peeve is not, like, that's not my understanding of a pet peeve. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, my next note is for page 72, which is actually for the next episode in the book. So I'll get to that. The next episode in this book is the last episode of the series. Griff gets a hand, and the illustration at the beginning of this is an illustration of Lisa smiling in front of a graduation banner and Griff kind of standing with his back to her, thinking about asking her to dance. And the caption is, Griff looked over to where Lisa was standing alone. Go for it, he thought. It's a very good illustration. I think all of the illustrations in this book are very good. So, yes, the next note on page 72 just says he wasn't eating cereal in the episode, and that's because they literally start off this book by saying Griff was still only half awake, came yawning into the kitchen to fix himself breakfast. And that entire part details his thoughts while reflecting on Danny and who Danny is to him and what he was doing the night before. It says he'd been up very late the night before, battling with his homework, working on the class pictures for the yearbook, and trying to finish one rather special one for his friend Danny, the crossing guard. All the kids were very fond of Danny, but to Griff, he was someone special. More than just a simple, kindly man who, trigger warning again for religious connotation, who shepherded them, I don't know how to pronounce that, across the intersection. In a fit of anger, Griff had once called him a R slur. I'm not going to say it, but that types out the word in the book. Not fully realizing what he was saying, it was then he drew his first picture of Danny and gave it to him by way of apology. The gift marked a turning point in Griff's life. Suddenly, his tough guy days were behind him. Lisa and the rest of the kids began to be his friends. He felt part of a group at last, which I feel like is an important distinction that they make because Griff was originally a member of the Pirates gang, which we'll talk more about in the book Martin Meets the Pirates, which I've read separately and I enjoy, although my opinions may change once I reread in this deep, analyzed way. Anyway, he felt part of a group at last. He could now see that he'd been mad at the world for handing him a crummy deal, and he was glad that the long, empty period when nobody, not even the pirate gang, wanted to know him was over, and all thanks to gentle, childlike, trusting Danny. So I think it's important that I read that out loud in full and in earnest to really bring emphasis to what Danny actually fully means to Griff, because otherwise, a lot of his actions in this episode may not make full sense to some people. Anyway, the note was he wasn't eating cereal in the episode. So, yeah, they start off by saying he's going to the kitchen to make himself breakfast, and when you get closer to my note, it says, now sitting at the kitchen table, he pushed aside his dish of oat flakes, along with the cereal-encrusted bowl Duke hadn't bothered to put into the soak, and a plate of curling pizza from supper the night before. He spread out the picture and began to color it, but he'd left it too late. Duke called from the bathroom, hey Griff, time for school. So I like how they emphasize how messy his apartment actually is, but there's no need to say he's eating cereal. He's not. There was no breakfast. And they do this a lot throughout this book where they say he's eating when he's not in the episode. I have a decent amount of notes on it. I just find it very interesting that they kept pointing that out when it's not true. Maybe it's just to like normalize him a little bit. But I feel like saying he's eating when he's not, I felt a little like maybe it was classist. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But like when you're kind of poor, as Griff probably is, I feel like that makes sense to me. You don't often have like regular meals, and children just like often forget to eat breakfast when they should. I know I often skipped breakfast as a kid, but that was because I was poor and also couldn't afford like school breakfast and often didn't have breakfast food around the house. So I don't know. It was interesting to me. I also have a note on the very next page that says this convo isn't in the episode. So that's because on page 73, Griff and his brother have a conversation that's not in the episode. And it's because of the quote that starts right here. For a guy who had dropped out at the earliest opportunity, Duke sure made waves about his kid brother's education. Quote, you gotta study if you want to get anywhere in the world, he'd say, needle stuck in a well-worn groove. Griff worked even faster on the picture until Duke, still toweling his head after his shower, looked into the kitchen. Hey, kiddo, move your tail out of here before I help it out. Griff glanced at his brother's bare feet, then sketched a cool it gesture in the air. You and whose army? He grinned before grabbing his bag and heading for the door. Duke shadowboxed at him and went back to the bathroom, laughing. Meanwhile, Danny was busy doing his most important thing in his life, seeing the kids safely across the street. He never tired of blowing his whistle, holding up his bright red stop sign, and watching his charges streamed across the road to school. So yeah, we don't see Duke get out of the shower and tell Griff to move his tail out of here, or the you and whose army line and the shadow boxing, but I like that they added it in to show more of their relationship, as it is kind of troubled throughout this episode. As well as pretty much any time we see them, they seem to be fighting or making up from a fight. And on the next note, it's page 75, where they just talk about the gorilla cheese sandwiches joke. I think I just left that as a personal note for myself because a lot of the time after my grandma would have strokes, she would repeat jokes that she found funny, even if everyone else had heard it, like jokes in TV shows and such that we were watching together. She would repeat the joke back to me as if I wasn't there. So that's just a personal note for myself. Yeah, I had been putting off this book for a while, like over 2 years, reading it for myself personally. Once I had seen this episode and realized what it was about, because it was just personally triggering to me. So I forgot I made that personal note. But yeah, sorry. Crying just a little bit. I cry a lot. My next note is on page 82, and it says, in the episode, they're not eating, so this comment isn't made. So again, right after I had just stated that there's a lot of times where they say that they're eating when they're not, here it is again. And the book says, while they were eating, Griff cut circles from a sheet of black Bristol board. He arranged them on a large blue card he'd marked to represent the universe. Okay, he said, cardboard discs in one hand, hot dog roll in the other. First the sun, then Mercury, then Earth. Venus, corrected Lisa. Earth is where you've blogged the ketchup. Griff swept the sun, Mercury, and Venus off the card, smeared the blob of Earth into oblivion, and began again. So yeah, in the episode, they don't make dinner together as far as we see, and they're not eating. So I don't know why they added that in, I guess just for extra emphasis on something. I'm not really sure. And my next note is also, and again, he's not eating in the episode. This happens a lot, like I was saying. And it's due to page 84, where it says, the next morning he got up early and studied some more. The sky was overcast and threatening rain. and he had to switch the light on to see clearly. He had his bowl of cereal at his elbow and his head well down over his books when Duke came into the living room stretching and yawning. So, yeah, in the episode, it doesn't seem to be threatening to rain. It doesn't rain in the episode at all. And also, he's not eating in the episode. There is no cereal in this moment in the episode. So that's 3 moments in a row when they have cereal or other foods when they don't. And there's even another one on page 85 when it's talking about Duke eating when he's not in the episode. And it's the quote where Duke says, "No way you'll catch me inside a school. I had enough of that when I was a kid." He He tipped the cereal box over a bowl and sat down at the table. There's no cereal box in the episode, and there's no bowl for him to pour it in. They're not eating. I don't understand that. My next note is on page 86, where, like I just stated, it's not raining in the episode. And that's where it says, he imagined Danny beaming and saying, "That's great. I knew you'd keep your promise, Griff." A light rain was falling. Through the mist, Griff saw a familiar orange and yellow figure on the near side of the intersection. He hurried forward, holding out the picture. Ta-da! The crossing guard was as surprised as Griff when she'd turned to face him. So yeah, a light rain was falling according to the book, but in the episode, there's no rain falling at all, not even the lightest amount. And my next note is on the very next page, page number 87. You may have just heard my dog yawn. Sorry about that. It's because we get Griff's thoughts about when he heard about the death of his parents. So, trigger warning for that. It says, then came little intakes of breath and a few stifled sobs. Griff sat like stone, staring at the rain streaming down the windows. Again, in the episode, it's not raining. The shock of what he'd heard had taken him back 2 years to that day when a policewoman had put her arm around him and told him that he had to be brave. ... And now, Danny. It was hard to understand there'd be no more smiling, lovable Danny. No more calls of "have a nice day." And the rest of it is in the episode, so I don't need to read about it. And my next note is on page 89. We don't see this in the episode, but it says, in the days that followed, Griff started acting more and more like he used to. He became aloof, inattentive, and unresponsive. He contributed his dollar to help buy a wreath for Danny, but refused to join in any discussions about the yearbook or the dance and showed no interest in schoolwork. Miss Gonzalez and Mr. Mackey shook their heads about him time and again in the staff room. So yeah, we don't see them in the staff room shaking their heads in the episode, but on page 89, that's what it says that they do. And it continues, such a strange boy. He seemed to be over the family tragedy, and now ... He'd shown such promise, such a waste ... Most of the kids left Griff alone. Let him be like that, they thought. Lisa was almost the only one who tried to get through the wall he'd built around himself, but he kept ignoring her or refusing to answer. When she told him that after talking it over carefully, the class had decided to hold the graduation dance after all, Griff stared at her blankly. So yeah, we just don't see that conversation in the staff room in the episode. But I like that they added it in here and showed the general feeling around Griff after he started to give up. The next note that I have is for page 91, and it's because they changed a character. So in the episode, Karen asks him for the picture of Danny for the yearbook, not Rachel. But in the book, they changed it to Rachel. So it just says here on page 90, Rachel stopped by his desk, and then it continues over to page 91. Griff, did you hear? We're dedicating the yearbook to Danny. I was wondering. She glanced down at the picture. Could we use your picture? So yeah, I don't know why they changed it to Rachel. It makes no sense to me, but they did. I'm not gonna say it feels racist. Okay, editing me is feeling like maybe it's racist. I don't know. It's really hard to tell because, like, it's probably written by Kit's mom, and she could have just, like, forgotten the girl's name, and it could be just that simple. But, like, I don't know. Make your own thoughts behind it. It's confusing to try to understand what they were thinking back in 1987, now that we're in, like, 2024. So I don't know, maybe it was racist, maybe it wasn't. Either way, wrong character. Because, I mean, maybe it does changing a character of color to a white character, but I don't know, maybe it was just a mistake. It's been about a year since the episode aired, so maybe they just didn't review it to get their facts straight. I'm not really sure. Anyway, my next note is for page 95, and my note says, the line about getting coffee isn't in the episode, but they do end up in a coffee shop, so it's probably cut for time or something. And that note is because after the fight between Griff and Duke, when they're standing on the stairs outside, it says, Griff suddenly understood that his brother really meant it. Whatever else they'd lost, they still had each other. He felt a choking in his throat, and tears welled up behind his eyes. Childish as it was, he just had to cry. Duke pulled him into his arms and tried in his awkward way to soothe him. It's okay, boy. Hey, Griff, it's okay. Gradually the sobbing stopped, and Griff smeared his wet cheeks with the back of his hand. He gave an apologetic grimace. Sorry, Duke. No sweat, said his brother, punching his chin very gently. Let's go have a coffee. He looked down at his feet, but I guess I better put on some shoes first. So yeah, there's no line in the episode where he apologizes for crying and then his brother says, no sweat, let's go get a coffee. But I guess I better put on some shoes first. Although I guess it was right after a shower, so he would have to put on shoes. And they do end up in a coffee shop, so yeah, I just think they cut it for time. Anyway, we're winding down to the end here. My next note is on page 97, where it just says again in the episode, it's Karen that gets the picture from Griff of Danny for the yearbook. And yeah, that's just because the book says, on Monday morning, fingers crossed, he handed in every one of his assignments. There was one more thing he had to do. Without a word, he gave Rachel a picture, carefully taped across the middle. So yeah, that's just because in the episode you can hear Karen say that she doesn't know why the picture is ripped down the middle and then taped back together in the photocopy of it. She just says, I don't know, he just handed over the picture when Connie asks her about it. And my next note is on the very next page, page 98. There's two notes for that one. The first one says, the episode is different here too, with no tapping of shoulders, but instead a table setup. So this is actually about the setup of the yearbooks on a table outside in the hallway. And it's because it says, at the back, Connie was setting out a buffet with a frosted cake, sandwiches, and a punch bowl. As she carefully arranged plates, beakers, and paper napkins, Rachel tapped her on the back. Ta-da! She held out a pile of stapled together books with brightly colored covers. So yeah, in the episode, there is a table set up with Rachel and Karen sitting at the table with a pile of yearbooks set out in front of them, and Connie walks up to the table and grabs a yearbook and starts opening it and flipping through and pointing out that the picture is ripped. There's no Connie setting up a buffet with a frosted cake. Kids do set up a table with a frosted cake and sandwiches and such, but Connie's not there doing that. She's outside in the hallway at the table of yearbooks. And the next note is a little bit down on the same page, page 98, where it says, "This line isn't in the episode either," and that is referencing when it says, "I knew we'd do it," said Rachel proudly, and the Gessner never let us down once thanks to Karen. The Gessner is the copy machine, and yeah, that line's just not in the episode. In the episode, the line is, "I knew we could do it all by ourselves." And that's it. So it's just a different line, and I just thought it was interesting what they changed. So I wanted to point that out. And my very next note is page 99, where it says these names are in the wrong order. So there's a list of names called out when the diplomas are handed out during the graduation in the classroom. And they just wrote them in the wrong order according to the episode. So in the book it says, "There was more clapping as she read out the list. One by one, the class came forward, received a diploma, and joined Miss Gonzalez on the stage." And the order of names in the book is Lisa Kennard, Karen Gillis, Pete Riley, Candy Lamb, Judy Erickson, and Billy Martin. Not in alphabetical order, thought Lisa. No way of telling whether Griff had passed. So in the episode, the order goes Pete Riley, Casey Rothfels, Lisa Kennard, Martin Schlegel, Connie, which I don't remember her last name, Karen Gillis, Rachel Hewitt, Robin Griffiths, and Jeffrey, which I did not write down his last name either, so sorry. So, yeah, we just have the wrong order in the book, and I don't know why they changed it, but yeah, Candy Lamb isn't called out in the episode that we hear of anyway. He's probably after Jeffrey, which is where they start to cut away to the graduation party scene, and they stop calling out the names after Robin Griff, but we do see Jeffrey get up, and that is why I wrote him down, because when they have their name called, they get up to go get their diploma. So that can help us know his name was called next. But after Jeffrey, they cut straight away to the disco ball and the graduation party, which is why my next note is my last note, which just is on page 101. It says, "We end on Pete telling his joke to Jeffrey." And that's just because they didn't state his name in the book, and I wanted to state his name. In the book, it just says, "Over by the buffet, Pete had found someone who actually hadn't heard his ancient joke. Grilled cheese sandwiches," he was explaining. Get it? And in the episode, we can see the person he's saying the joke to is Jeffrey. So I just wanted to give him his name. And that's the last page in the book. The only other thing I wanted to point out in this book is after the last page, it says, "Look for other Degrassi books," at least in my copy. Kids of Degrassi Street, and it has them in the wrong order for publication order for what we've been reading. It has them in the order of Casey Draws the Line being first. Second is Catherine Finds Her Balance. Third is Griff Gets a Hand, which is this book, which is correct because number 3 is on the spine of my copy, so they couldn't get that wrong. And then number 4 says Griff Makes a Date, which was published second. And then Karen Keeps Her Word is number 5. Number 6, they have Lisa Makes the Headlines, which we know is the very first Kids of Degrassi Street book that was published. And then for number 7, they have Martin Meets the Pirates. And number 8, they have Noel Buys a Suit. They also have a list of all of the Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High books. And from what I can tell, those are listed in the right order. which makes sense because all of the original publications of those books have the numbers on the spine, like this one does. So it'd be next to impossible to get those wrong. So yes, this is a reprint, I'm guessing, of this book because otherwise they wouldn't have the Degrassi Junior High / Degrassi High books in the back because those wouldn't have been written yet when this book was originally written. So yeah, that is all of my notes for Griff Gets a Hand. I plan to do a bonus episode for our next episode. It's going to be my Halloween episode where I'm going to be talking about whether or not Degrassi could make a spooktacular joke book. And I am basing that one on a Phineas and Ferb spooktacular joke book, which is the title of the book. I found it for 10 cents at a Kappa's Closet thrift store near me. So that's going to be our fun little Halloween special. And then after that, we'll be back in order, hopefully, for the Kids of Degrassi Street series. Anyway, I hope you have a great holiday, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll catch you next time. Bye!